All right, everybody, how you doing? Welcome to this week's episode of Difficult Conversations. I am here with State Representative candidate Andrew Flowers. Andrew was kind enough to take a little time out of his busy schedule to talk with us and just kind of give us his point of view on a few different issues and to answer whatever questions you might have. So again, I'm Dean Jenkins of Supply the Why. And just to throw the quick disclaimer out there, these views are my own. They are not the views of my day shift, my day employment. And this is all about just having general conversations with people and just trying to make sure that we can get down to the truth and just be as honest and open with each other as possible. So, Andrew, how you doing tonight?
Dean, I am doing great. It is my pleasure that you took the time to invite me and for me to be here on Difficult Conversations. And it's just an honor. And I really admire everything you're doing in your approach, the Supply the Why approach. I applaud you, and Stoughton is lucky to have you, not just as an officer, but as a public figure that has these conversations.
Well, thank you very much, Andrew, and I appreciate your kind words. So while we're on the kind word train here, so why don't you start by briefly describe the top two things you want the potential voters to know about you? Who is Andrew Flowers, and what are you all about?
I'm a kid who came from a working class family, and I'm an economist. So a little about me. I grew up in a family that struggled. We moved more than 20 times across 5 states before I graduated high school. I saw my parents go bankrupt twice. And as a teenager, I worked for my father's janitorial business. I would get up before dawn. Him and I, my brother, we would clean office buildings and retail stores and churches before we'd race to school. So that upbringing really gave me urgency, and I fought for, and I worked hard to get where I am today. I put myself through the University of Chicago, and that leads me to my second point, where I'm an economist. I care a lot about people's livelihood. I have a special appreciation for communities that help working class families like mine, that help them thrive, right? From education to housing to healthcare. And so as an economist, I am a progressive in my values. I do believe in social and economic and racial justice, but as an economist, I follow data and I follow science, and I try to do what's best according to the facts. And I hope to have that approach as a state representative for half of Stoughton. And just to be clear, I'm running in the 8th Norfolk District, which includes precincts 2, 3, 4, and 6 in Stoughton. And the primary is September 1st. And yeah, those are the two things to know about me. Working class kid who's an economist.
Well said. So while you're talking about your precinct and what jurisdiction you'll be covering, do you mind just giving everybody your full jurisdiction?
Yeah, for sure.
What are all the towns you cover?
I'm running for state representative in the 8th Norfolk District, which includes all of Sharon, half of Stoughton, the precincts I mentioned in Stoughton, the western and southern parts of Stoughton, and it includes a quarter of Walpole, 2 precincts in Walpole where I live, and precincts 3 and 4, and it includes precinct 4 in Mansfield. So one little orphan precinct in Mansfield. That's the district.
Okay. Well, that sounds good. So here's a question for you. So, Andrew, where do you stand as far as defunding the police, and are you in favor of it? And if you are, how does it get implemented? If you were, if we did the whole like king for a day thing like we used to do when we were kids. So if you were king for a day, how would you implement it?
My answer is no. That's the short answer. No, I do not support defund the police as a movement, as a slogan, which is really what it is. It's a slogan. And I don't support defund the police as a concrete government objective. So that's the short answer is no. I don't support defunding the police. And here's my long answer. What I do support is a honest conversation about what we ask police officers to do. I believe we need armed, trained police officers like yourself who are invested in the communities they serve and who can protect us from violence and larceny and crime. I mean, all down the book. We need trained public service officers who have weapons. That's my belief. But I think we have asked police, like we've asked teachers in schools, we've asked police to just solve all the problems of society. So it could be domestic, disturbances. It could be mental health crises. It could be childcare disputes. And I think the honest conversation I want us to have is about, are we underinvesting? Are we underinvesting in social workers, mental health counselors, school guidance counselors? And am I suggesting that we have social workers respond to a 911 call with an armed and dangerous individual? No. That's why I don't support defund the police. But I do support the need for greater social services. And I see it all around us. I had a homeless man who is a friend and a member of my church live in an RV in my driveway. And he is a great guy. But let me tell you a story, Dean. He had a warrant out for his arrest. And the officer in Walpole knocked on our door and said, "Hey, we know this guy. We know he's here. He's a really good guy. The warrant is because he has some unpaid traffic tickets and unpaid child support." Well, he is homeless. He couldn't pay his child support. He couldn't get a job. So they took him to jail. We bailed him out for, a very small fee. It was like $40. It was something very small. But I feel like our culture, and this is not the fault of the police, but we criminalize poverty. And so if we invested more in people in terms of social services, that friend of mine wouldn't have to have a warrant, wouldn't have to have that encounter. It was a very peaceful encounter. But what I'm getting at is, we ask the police to solve all the problems of society, and we have to have a reckoning with that and still have armed, trained police officers.
I hear you. I hear you. So what you're saying is maybe going back to just having police officers handle police issues only.
Yes.
As opposed to, okay. All right. I hear you, because a lot of people out there, they might not understand. If you're just tuning in for the first time, I've talked about it before, whereas we have become the kind of like the trash heap of society, where it's like, I got a problem here. I can't quite, it doesn't fit in these neat little boxes I have. Just give it to the cops and let them figure it out. And that's kind of, what's happened a lot. And mental health is probably one of the biggest things we deal with on the street, on the job. So I understand where you're coming from with that. So as far as I have a question from Bob. So Bob wants to know where you stand as far as qualified immunity with police officers. There's been a lot of talk of removing qualified immunity from police officers. So do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, let's start by saying that qualified immunity is a very complex topic, and frankly, it's a misunderstood topic, especially nowadays, where I think there's a lot of misinformation. So let's be as concrete as we can. And to be clear, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an expert, and I will listen to lawyers, and I have, and I'll listen to police officers. Here's my position, as best I can tell, on August 5th. We need to limit but not abolish qualified immunity. Why? Currently, in Massachusetts, as in pretty much everywhere in America, qualified immunity, it denies victims of police violence their day in court for civil damages, right? So putting aside criminal charges of a police officer, if your constitutional rights are violated, under qualified immunity, the courts will throw out your case before even entertaining what happened. It could be racial profiling or maybe excessive force. But if you feel like you need to have your day in court for civil damages, not criminal damages, unless there's an exact replica in case law, under qualified immunity, public officials, but especially police officers, but it's all government officials, are exempt. And this is not a law. Qualified immunity is a court-made doctrine that's evolved over the last few decades and was informed by the Supreme Court. So my position is, currently, it's just not right. If, as there was a case of a woman in Athol who was tased in her back, and she tried, it was unnecessary force. Even the courts agreed that it was unnecessary force, but she couldn't sue for civil damages because the court said this officer has qualified immunity. Now, let me end by saying this to answer your friend's not your friend, but Bob's question. I'm not saying we eliminate qualified immunity because police officers have a very dangerous job, and we need to respect that they deal with people who are pissed off, right? I mean, you deal with people who are pissed off, and you have to use force to subdue people, especially when they're violent and dangerous. I'm not saying eliminate all qualified immunity, but we do need to not deny victims of police violence their day in court. So that's why I support some version, whether it's the House version or the Senate version that's being debated right now here in Beacon Hill, to roll back qualified immunity. I don't think it's it's actually going to increase trust, I believe, between police officers and the people they serve, because the people will know that if something goes wrong, that they'll get their day in court.
All right. So let me jump in and clarify a couple things, because one thing that I feel like you may have left out there, Andrew, is qualified immunity. It covers police officers when they're acting in good faith. So it's not just, hey, I made a mistake, but I knew what I was doing was wrong and I did it anyway. That's kind of like what sounds like what you're saying, but that's not the case. You have to be acting in good faith, and it has to be objectively reasonable based on the circumstances at the time in order to be covered by qualified immunity. So, as I'm sure you can imagine, or maybe you can't, because I don't know if you've ever, if you've had anybody close to you that's in law enforcement. I don't know if you've really had these conversations, but it really does come down to a split-second judgment sometimes with whether or not do you do this, do you use force, do you not use force, do you have time to tactically retreat, or versus do you need to go forward and just handle the situation? It is a game time, very quick decision. So qualified immunity covers you in those circumstances when you have to act right then and there, and it is something that, again, based on the circumstances at the time, you have to make some sort of a choice. It definitely does not cover criminal acts. For example, the obvious thing that everybody's talking about is Derek Chauvin in Minneapolis. There is no state in the world where that would be covered under qualified immunity. Nobody covers that under, not in the world. No place in the United States that would cover that act under qualified immunity. Qualified immunity would cover like suicide by cop type situation, where you get called someplace and somebody is telling you to shoot him or something like that, and then they pull out a remote control and point it at you in such a way where you believe it's a gun. You end up shooting this person, and you find out later it's a remote control. That's what qualified immunity would cover you for, that kind of stuff. So you're right. It is very misunderstood because it's getting thrown around so much. It's become one of those buzz terms that everybody's throwing around. And it's important that that everybody understands that, especially you, because you're going to be in a if things work out for you, you are going to be in a position where, quite frankly, a police officer might need your help for something they've done in good faith, but it ends up having a tragic result. But it was something that, based on the information at the time, in the time in which they had to make a decision, they made an action, and maybe it didn't work out well, but that's what qualified immunity covers. So I got a question here from John. Says, give me 1 second to read it. So he wants to know, again, we've already spoken about this, but talk a little bit more about your feelings about social workers being deployed with police officers. Do you think it can work in certain situations? Do you think it's something that can't work at all? Where are you with the social workers?
I just think our society is facing a number of crises, right? It's not just coronavirus, and obviously there's big picture crises of racial injustice and climate change, but it's not just coronavirus. There's a mental health pandemic, really, in this country before COVID-19. And so you have a lot of people who, because of either mental illness or because of an individual crisis, a dispute, they turn to 911. Well, like you said, I think you said it's like the one recourse people have if they're in an emergency, even if it's not an emergency that necessarily requires law enforcement. Law enforcement are the people that have to respond. You're the first responders. You show up. I am proud to want to work with the National Association of Social Workers and social workers in the Department of Mental Health here in Massachusetts to think of, okay, as your friend Johnny says, let's have them at the table. What are cases where police say, I probably don't need to respond to that call. I can have a social worker respond instead. And then the social workers can say, I'm uncomfortable with, an armed, person who's hallucinating. I need, that's a police officer response call.
We're all uncomfortable with that. Even police officers are uncomfortable with that.
Right. And so I emphasize that this is, legislation cannot specify the exact details, but what it can do is it can say, why are we underinvesting in the Department of Public Health, for one example, has had its budget cut a lot over the last decade. I don't think that's a smart idea. And I think I'm not saying don't give money to police. I'm just trying to say we need to reevaluate our priorities because we make the job of police worse when we have a mental health crisis across the country and we don't have people like social workers, but it could be other roles who are there to respond for those services.
Understood. So from there, since we're talking about police response, what is your stance on police use of force in Massachusetts?
I like a lot of what came out of the House and Senate bills. I like some parts of one bill more than the other. So the general approach, I believe, is that we need police reform that bans the use of chokeholds, that limits and bans the use of tear gas in most instances, and that limits the use of no-knock warrants. I think the bill that passed the House last week, where if there is reason to believe a minor or an elder person over the age of 65 is in a house, you can't, it bans no-knock warrants, like the kind that killed Breonna Taylor. So I do believe on limits of police use of force. I think that, again, this is going to build trust between police and the communities they serve in the long run. And given evidence, even with armed countries elsewhere in the world, it's not necessary to have the militarization of the police, the ability for police to subdue people with chokeholds, in terms of their gear, have tactical equipment that is passed down from the military. I'm opposed to that. And I think we can respect police and the very difficult job they do, but recognize there are too many people who've been killed or injured in this country, and they've been caught on camera in recent years, and many of them are black and brown. And whether it's chokeholds or no-knock warrants, we need to scale it back. And so I firmly support what the House passed, in particular, a better version of all those limits on police use of force.
Okay, so I have a couple follow-up questions. So a lot of the examples you use, they're national. They've happened sporadically nationally, but specifically to Massachusetts, because everything you mentioned, they've happened in the United States, but none of that's happened in Massachusetts. So, for example, if let's talk about the chokehold, for example. So the chokehold, I'm also a defensive tactics instructor too. I don't know if you knew that about me. I am the coordinator for the Stoughton Police Department. I also teach for the Municipal Police Training Council, which is the body that governs training for police officers in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So banning chokeholds, for example. If it is a situation where it is perceived by me or some other police officers that it is lethal, in that my life or the life of somebody else is in danger, that would entitle us to use our firearms if need be. It is something that would entitle us to ram somebody with a police cruiser, to stab somebody if we had to. All right. It is a life-saving level of force. So if we ban chokeholds altogether, you're saying so I would be able to shoot somebody, stab somebody, hit them with my cruiser, smack them with my flashlight, but I couldn't choke them if it was a hand-to-hand situation, or if it was a situation where maybe it's not safe for me to discharge my firearm because I'm not sure of my target because my target's moving, and even more importantly, I'm not sure of what's beyond my target and hitting an innocent bystander like we're seeing across the country, where in some cities we have all these shootings and the intended targets aren't getting hit. We're having like little kids are being murdered because the bad actors are not sure of what's beyond their target. So talk to me a little bit about that. Do you think that we should be banning chokeholds like altogether, or just maybe limiting it to serious bodily harm or death type situations?
There are details here that obviously you know far more about than I, and so I want to just recognize that. I'm not going to pretend to be a defense instructor, tactical instructor like you, Dean. You know, and what I know though is that from the ACLU, from the Black and Latino Legislative Caucus at the State House, from many civil rights groups, they see one too many instances of police dying, of people dying in police custody or being injured in police custody by a chokehold. Even when it's banned, even when there's a loophole or an opportunity to say your life was threatened, that legal recourse makes it very difficult to prove. In the case of Eric Garner, in the case of other people, that, well, were you threatened? Was the person resisting? And so I think with chokeholds, it's enough of a repeated pattern that, yes, if you feel like your life is threatened, obviously you have other options that you're trained in to defend yourself on. But with so many people injured or killed by chokeholds, I think it's time that we ban them.
Okay. So you're talking, again, you mentioned things outside of the Commonwealth.
Well,
anything specifically in Massachusetts?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, give me something that's happened actually in this state.
Yeah, so Springfield. I mean, the Springfield Police Department, their narcotics unit was singled out by the Department of Justice as, quote, one of the worst in the country in terms of excessive force. And this is the Trump administration. I mean, the Trump administration is notoriously very pro-police and wants to defend the rights of police to use, necessary force. But they had to even single out the Springfield Police Department and say, this narcotics unit, for instance, there was an example where a 17-year-old boy was on a bike, just riding a bike next to a scene unrelated to the incident, and a police officer punched him in the face. And obviously, I'm not saying that all police officers would do that, and you would not defend this officer, but it was a repeated culture there. So, I mean, I don't think it's just Minnesota or it's just New York. I think, all the police departments in my district, when I hear Walpole, and I have a good working relationship with Chief Carmichael, when I have met Chief Donna McNamara and Stoughton, Chief Ford and Sharon, we have wonderful police departments in this district, and I'm really proud to live with such amazing officers. But I don't think Massachusetts is immune, especially when I hear the Black and Latino Legislative Caucus tell me as a white person that people of color throughout the state don't feel comfortable in some cities, and they feel that there's an excessive force culture, like in Springfield. I think we need to have a reckoning in Massachusetts before, we, I hope not, have an incident. I don't want us to have an incident like that's happened elsewhere.
Okay. So now I got to put my defensive tactics instructor on. And again, I see everybody out there. I see your questions. I'm going to get to your questions. But is this a little bit of maybe creating a storm in a teacup here? Where, again, this is stuff that's just not happening regularly in Massachusetts. I don't care what profession it is, and I don't care if we're talking about stockbrokers. I don't care if we're talking about chocolatiers. I don't know if you know, like Jeffrey Dahmer. Remember Jeffrey Dahmer?
Yeah.
Jeffrey Dahmer was a chocolatier, but I bet you still have a Snickers every once in a while, right? Like, that's the type of thing. Like, we can't blame everybody from a certain profession because it's impossible when you have a human element to weed out every bad apple. And that example you used with Springfield, obviously that sounds like that was way over the top, where you had a 17-year-old that was riding by on a bicycle. And if it happens the way that you seem to remember it, like he just cold cocks a kid for no reason, that's obviously out of bounds. And also that would not be covered by qualified immunity either. That would be a criminal act. So we already have things in place to address these issues that, again, aren't happening. Because again, I'm if I ask you for examples in Massachusetts, and not just you, other people too, very few people can come up with examples in Massachusetts of these things happening. So we must be doing something right here that's not happening nationally. So just food for thought there. And again, it's again, if you had several examples, I'd be all for it. But like a one outlier example of one out of 351 municipalities in the state, not to mention all the college police departments, all the federal police departments. I don't know. I think those odds are pretty good, and I'm pretty sure that whatever happened in Springfield is being rigorously investigated, and those people are, if they were in the wrong, it's going to be dealt with accordingly. Let's grab a couple questions here. All right. So it says, how do you feel about legislators going through shoot, don't shoot scenario simulations to better understand how quickly things can happen in potentially violent situations? That's from D. Burgundy. So how do you feel about that, doing a shoot or don't shoot?
D, I love the question. And yes, I think it shouldn't just be something that I answer. I think it should be, part of the work of a legislator. So D, I see your question here about would I go through simulations to have a better frame of reference? That's your question. And what Dean just read. Yes, I would absolutely go through it, but I would encourage the entire state house to. So this is a big reason I'm running, D, is that too many state reps, frankly, are lazy. And I'm just going to be blunt, okay? The legislature meets in session to have debates about 25% or a quarter as much as it did in the 80s and 90s. It meets about once a week on Wednesday, typically, during a normal session period. And I think if we really saw a state rep as a full-time job, not having a side business and being at the state house not only more frequently, but also just doing more participatory stuff, not shaking hands at clam bakes, not showing up at Eagle Scout events, though those are great. I love that. I love Eagle Scouts. The idea of a state rep is I want concrete knowledge. So the idea of doing a simulation, I would jump at that. So the last thing I'll say to D is, in my town of Walpole, where I'm on the finance committee, when I talk about school infrastructure projects, for example, like we need to repair a roof on an elementary school, I've walked the elementary school. It's not just a thing on paper for me. I visit it with the superintendent. I'll walk through it. And if I was a state rep and I had to vote on qualified immunity, limits on police use of force, a statewide licensing system, which we need, by the way, and the police agree, I would actually get that concrete knowledge. I would walk through every step of the way. So I love the suggestion, D. Yes, I would do it.
All right. So let's go to Karen's question. So part of the bill 2800 that came out was they want a clear use of de-escalation before any deployment of force. That was one of the things that I saw. Here's the problem I had with that, Andrew, and I'm sure I speak for every cop in the Commonwealth. There's no definition of what meets de-escalation. If I pulled 10 different police officers, if I blindly put them in a room and said, hey, everybody write down what you think de-escalation means, I can assure you you're going to get 10 different answers. So, and it's clear that they did not bring any police minds because, again, I'm a defensive tactics instructor. I certainly didn't get asked. None of the people I teach with were asked. So we have people coming up with these terms that have never been through any of this training. So what is your definition of de-escalation, or what does it mean to you?
So just to be clear, I am reviewing the full bill. It's over 90 pages, I believe, and I've dug into a lot of it. Section 10, Section 10 on qualified immunity, for instance. Obviously, the bans on police use of force. I don't recall off the top of my head the exact definition of de-escalation in 2800 or the House bill or the various bills. I don't recall reading, or I don't recall the exact definition. But de-escalation to me, to answer Karen's point, means a deliberate and sustained effort by an officer to avoid deploying harmful or lethal force, and whether through conversation, whether through bringing in other bystanders to talk, to avoid deploying weapons, even as a threat. That's just my layman's understanding. Obviously, you're an officer. Obviously, a lot of your viewers and commenters are officers, so you know more than me. I don't recall from the bill the exact de-escalation definition, but I think it makes sense to ask for de-escalation and write it into the statute to require it first.
Okay, I love that. Here's something else you might not have known about me. And this is, I am a firm believer in de-escalation, so much so that I am also a member of the regional crisis negotiation team. So
Wow.
If I am a crisis negotiator, clearly I am a big fan of de-escalation. That's the whole point of what we do. We try to end situations with nobody getting hurt and nobody getting killed. But here's the issue. And there's a reason why you don't recall what it said in that bill, Andrew. And the reason why is because it was not defined in that bill. They just said de-escalation and then just left it there like that last little piece of broccoli on the plate that nobody wants to eat. They just left it there with no explanation as to how it works, what constitutes an act of de-escalation. Because again, 10 different cops will give you 10 different answers as to what makes an attempt at de-escalation. So I'm going to follow up with that is, do you think that before any of this gets passed, that it might be a good idea to involve well-trained police officers that train other police officers to maybe get some feedback from those of us that are actually doing the job?
Yes, and yes. And so one of the things that I hope to say on your show that is a direct answer to your question, but is something that is a big reason I'm running, beyond just police reform or de-escalation debates. Here's what I'll say. A lot of your viewers, maybe they're police officers, if you don't like my views on qualified immunity or on limits on use of force, we'll have a conversation. I respect the work you do, and I'll listen and I'll learn from you. But here's where I think we agree. I hate the process of how legislation is passed on Beacon Hill. The reason I'm actually in this race for state rep is because it's not transparent, it's not timely, and basically it's like a hurry up and wait. They never do anything until there's political pressure, and then they just have to get something done instantly. And it's like, whoa, how about you take a deliberative approach, not be lazy when there's not a national crisis, right? Talk to police officers, have an actual experience with the shoot or not experience, right? And get the bill right. There could have been a chance here to get a really good bill and have maybe not everything that, I'm going to be honest, maybe not everything that the police unions and the Chiefs of Police Association want. And we may not agree on some things like QI, like qualified immunity, but at least you would respect the process. I will not stand for a bill passing at 4 a.m. That to me is a process that's broken. When the bill is announced and within 8 days it's passed, to me, that's not okay. And I have run on this. So if you go to my website, andrewflowers.com, there's a whole section called State House Reform. And here's what I mean by that. We need to improve transparency. We need to limit the concentration of power in the State House in terms of the leadership. So right now we're one of the least transparent legislatures in the country. So you can vote in committee and you don't have to publish your votes. They're secret votes. So bills get killed or bills get passed at the committee level. They get sent to the House floor for a vote, but you don't know how your rep voted. And so you need to be able to hold your rep accountable. That's transparency, but the whole concentration of power matters because of how this bill was passed, the police reform bill. I think the House did a much better job. They debated for over 30 hours, over 4 days. It was about a month from when they announced that they're working on this with the Black and Latino Legislative Caucus to when they passed it. That was a much better job. The Senate was much more of a rush. 2800 was a rush job. And so even though I agree with some of the Senate bill's principles, and you may disagree, your viewers may disagree, where we find common ground is that process is unacceptable. You can't pass bills at 4 a.m.
Agreed. So let me draw a little bridge here. So, and again, whether or not people agree or disagree is, that's again, that's why this is a difficult conversation. But what you spoke earlier about building trust between the community and the police, right? What better way to build trust between the community and the police by having representatives from both be involved in this process? That's the part that I think that is it's a bit of a slap in the face to those of us in Massachusetts, because again, outside of a kid maybe or maybe not getting punched in the face for no reason in Springfield, that stuff's really not happening in Massachusetts like it's happening nationally. Like, you don't see unarmed people being shot. You don't see people being choked to death for no reason. I challenge anybody, if anybody's watching, if anybody has any examples of any of this stuff that's happened here in the Commonwealth, and again, here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, please share it with me, and I'm all ears. But it just seems like everybody wants it both ways. You can't have a process that's supposed to build trust and transparency, and then, as you said, and I agree with you, have a bill that's passed at 4 a.m. Oh, and by the way, we're not going to involve any of the people that actually have boots on the ground in this process. Well, so that's, I don't know. Do you have a response for that, or?
I don't really see that much daylight between us. Like, you have to involve stakeholders. You have to involve stakeholders. What the police unions and the police representative bodies, I hope, understand is, this process was flawed, but going forward, it's not over. It's not the process is not over. It's still in conference committee, right? The bill hasn't emerged. We don't know if the governor will even sign it. He may veto it. And to be clear, just to take a step back, this didn't just start after the murder of George Floyd, right? Mm-hmm. This process for a statewide post system was initiated over a year ago. I mean, Governor Baker has been working with the Black and Latino Legislative Caucus and the different police associations on a post system. What's new is the reality we see from the murder of George Floyd, that there needs to be more than a post system. We need more than a post system. But again, I completely agree with you, Dean. The process is not okay. We can do better on process. Even when we may disagree on QI or limits on use of force, I will work to do better on process.
Awesome. So, and just again to for clarification purposes, the post system was actually something that was initiated by the Mass Chiefs of Police.
Yes.
So I believe it was 2017, but don't quote me on that. The chief of Natick PD was the driving force behind wanting to get the post system to here in Massachusetts. But again, when he and his conglomerate, when they wanted to do that, however many years ago, it fell upon deaf ears. And now it's amazing that something happens 1,400 miles away from where I work, and now all of a sudden it's a priority. And I think that is where the trust is broken, Andrew. And it seems like this is being snuck through under the color of night as a knee-jerk reaction to something that happened someplace that's far away. I've never been to Minneapolis. I don't know anybody that works there. I don't know how they're trained, or I don't know anything about it. But it seems like a lot of what's happening in these other places is now governing what we do here in the Commonwealth. And I just don't get it. So got a couple comments here. Let me try to sift through. All right. So it seems like Karen agrees with you about how quickly they've never worked so quickly in their lives, which it certainly seemed like they got that 2800 through very quick. Ma Edward says they never include people it will affect the most. I don't know about every single time, but that's the case here. And again, it's not that it's just affecting police officers. Ultimately, that's going to affect law-abiding citizens when you have police officers where that feel to the point where they're damned if they do and damned if they don't. It's going to be one of those paralysis by analysis type situations where you're going to have police officers go to scenes and they're going to be running through a checklist. Meanwhile, somebody's being victimized, but they say, oh, wait a minute, I can't act yet. I got to do this, and this to make sure I don't lose my house. Now I can help you. And I can tell you right now, that's not a good situation or a safe situation for anybody to be in, you or me. So just bear that in mind. All right. What else do we have for questions?
We can talk about issues beyond police reform if you want.
Sure. Yeah, it seemed like that's kind of the way it happened here. So what? We have a question from Mark Struck. Mr. Flowers, would you be willing to put something forward to get more funding for police officers to do more outreach with children?
Oh, gosh, I would have to see the specific details. I'm not opposed to the idea. Actually, I want to applaud, take a moment and applaud the Walpole Police Department and Chief John Carmichael for getting national recognition for their efforts on community policing. They have done, and I firmly believe in the idea of community policing. Sometimes it's a little bit of an ambiguous term. It can mean anything to anybody, but the intent, at least as how Chief Carmichael and the Walpole police officers implement community policing, is fantastic. And a big reason why is they engage directly with kids. It's not just an SRO, right? The school resource officer, Officer Hart here in Walpole, does a great job in our school system, but it's also various programs. They have a hockey net. They have basketball courts across the street from the police station, and they encourage kids to come. They do positive tickets where kids who are wearing their helmet or who are, returning lost items, they get recognition by police for doing the right thing, the positive thing. So I love police officers who engage with the community, build trust with kids, especially. So yes, I would. It seems like we have some funding, some resources, some bandwidth, to Mark's question, to have police officers engage with kids. I think it's great. It builds trust. But in terms of the specifics, I'll have to see.
Absolutely. Because I know one of the things that's being talked about nationally is actually removing school resource officers from schools. So, judging by what you said, it doesn't sound like you're in favor of that. I don't want to put words in your mouth. Do you have any thoughts on removing school resource officers?
No, I'm not in favor of removing school resource officers just for the sake of doing so. I'm talking about a more holistic conversation about where are we deploying our social services investments, right? Is it, do we need to hire another SRO or do we need to hire a social worker for the town, right? That's the conversation I'm talking about. I'm not talking about, removing SROs. I think they do a good job.
Yeah, so Karen put a little more meat on those bones. She says that that Warren and Presley they're filing to get rid of SROs, saying that they intimidate students and again, that's also a role that I had at one point. I was Boston School Police way back when. I've worked a total of 8 years in academic environments before I came to Stoughton. And when I got to Stoughton, I was a school resource officer for to 2015, 2016 school year. And I can tell you right now, that's one of the best jobs in law enforcement because you truly get a chance to make a difference in people's lives every single day in that role. And there's people that are now young adults that were students when I was an SRO that I still to this day keep in touch with. And it's just a super important job. And it's the type of thing where if you are more resource than you are either school or officer, that is the main thing that you're trying to do there. And that is the most important part of that job. So Amy Cyrus says, can you please explain the no-knock warrant? So Amy, a no-knock warrant is when you have to, let's talk about a warrant in general. A warrant is when you develop probable cause to, let's say, search a residence for a person that committed X amount of crimes. A no-knock warrant takes even more information and a higher burden of proof because of the dangerousness. Not only do you have to prove the probable cause to get the warrant, you also have to provide reasons as to why you feel that they are so dangerous that your safety would be jeopardized by knocking and announcing police. So that's how you get a no-knock warrant. Hopefully that answers that question. So if you get a no-knock warrant, that is not usually a fly by the seat of my pants judge, like you just shove a piece of paper in front of a judge and they just sign off on it. They have a ton of questions and you got to satisfy each one of those questions in order for them to say, all right, I believe you. You have more than enough here to get a warrant, to get a no-knock warrant to go and effect an arrest. All right. Usually very highly dangerous situations, you would be the only reason you'd have a no-knock warrant. Hopefully that answered your question. All right. Catherine asked, do you believe in the thin blue line flag being flown at most stations, including fire stations?
No, I don't believe in flying the thin blue line flag at fire stations or at police stations. If it's a blue line that has long been a symbol of police, that's great. But the actual American flag distorted with the blue line is something I find it unfortunate for two reasons. One, the American flag is the American flag. My dad served in the Army. He retired as an Army major. My brother served 2 terms, 2 tours in the Iraq War. The American flag is the American flag. The blue line as a symbol is fine, but the blue line on the American flag, especially because, for the second reason, it manifested itself. It came about. Really, it became more popular after the Black Lives Matter movement really gained steam. And I feel that it's unnecessarily divisive. We can have blue line symbolism, but the blue line flag is unnecessary controversy when we can respect police officers, but also respect the American flag as it is.
Okay. So I'm going to piggyback that. Would it matter if it were, say, a rainbow flag or a BLM banner?
Anything.
Would that change your?
No. I'm not opposed. I am opposed to changing the American flag to make it like the colors of Walpole, right? The school colors of Walpole, or the Pride LGBTQ flag, or Black Lives Matter in the flag. No. The American flag's the American flag, and so what it's doing, the blue line flag, it's creating a debate over what we all should share, right? You can disagree about like Blue Lives Matter and Black Lives Matter. We can have that conversation, and that's a difficult conversation, right? Right, Dean? Right? This is what your show is called. It's a difficult conversation, but don't wrap it in the flag. To me, I'm okay with the blue line symbolism on police. Like in Walpole, there's one that's a sidewalk. That's great. I don't mind. I don't mind that. But the blue line flag, I'm just opposed to it across the board. Because even if it was LGBTQ, rainbow, or anything else, I just don't like changing the American flag.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. And again, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, I'm in a very unique position, as I'm sure you can imagine, being, you know, my everyday life, I am black, and for my employment, I am blue. So I am about, you know, no matter where I go, I can't win. You know, when it comes to that kind of thing. When I work, I have a certain amount of demographic that are going to dislike me no matter what I do. And then when I am not at work, I'm going to have a certain amount of demographic that's not going to like me no matter what I do. Just based on a color. You know, one is based on blue, one is based on black. So I hear what you're saying. It's one of those things where I don't see it your way, but I like the fact that you were willing to explain your thought process on that, and I certainly respect that. You know, Catherine says that the thin blue line has been around and became popular when Sergeant Chestnut was executed that Sunday morning, and yeah. I obviously I feel some kind of way about that because I've trained a lot of people from Weymouth. I work with I worked a shift over there to cover when those officers needed time to grieve. Wow. So it hits home with me, and I see it for what it really is. It's just a It's a way. It's the police version. This is just my opinion. It's a police version of the POW flag. It is our way to remember the fallen people that decided to step up and do a little more for their community. So, that's what it is to us. It's definitely not meant to divide anybody. It's just a way of remembering the people that paid the ultimate sacrifice for you and for me. All right. So before I tear up, let me move on to the next one. John says, a different John says, I think these lawmakers should spend some time training with skilled officers like an FTO program so they can see how things unfold and see what types of decisions we need to make in real time. So it seems like you have an offer.
I agree.
John's offering to have you join him in his car for an approved ride-along, or with another department, perhaps. I certainly would take that offer to you as well.
I would be honored. Honestly, I would be honored. Yes, and I think it's not just voluntarily going on a ride-along. I think we need boots on the ground knowledge among lawmakers. Mm-hmm. And again, that's where the kind of effort and background comes in, because you're making decisions on transportation systems. Are you a train engineer? No. You're making decisions on climate change. You're not an environmental scientist. You make decisions on taxes and the economy. Well, not everyone's an economist. I mean, I know a lot about taxes and the economy, but I don't know anything about, policing. And not that I don't know anything, right? But I don't have expertise. You can't have expertise in every domain. So I'm a big believer in bringing more substance to the debate that happens on Beacon Hill. And it's literally the reason I am running, is that we have to improve process. We have to be more transparent. And disagree with me, you may, about the thin blue line flag or about qualified immunity. My promise to you, even if you don't vote for me, is I will bring more substance and demand that the State House have more experiential, boots on the ground knowledge about the things they vote on. Because right now, too many lawmakers are kind of out to lunch and vote as they're told. They just kind of toe the party line. And I'm a Democrat. Yeah, I'm running in the Democratic primary. But one of the things I'm running on is that we're under a kind of monolithic Democratic machine, and we're not going to have the best policy. We're not going to have the best government until we have more debate and kind of disagreements. In other words, Dean, we need to have more difficult conversations. The problem on Beacon Hill is that they don't have difficult conversations. They would rather duck and hide. They can't take a punch. Like, I can take a punch, literally and figuratively, from your people, your people who may disagree with me. But I respect you. I respect you as a person, Dean, but I respect police officers, people in your role. And so that's what it has to come down to, is mutual respect, but effort. It's not enough just to say you respect police officers. Make the effort to go on the ride-alongs, to do the FTO training like John suggested, and to make the effort to have debates on Beacon Hill and engage and have difficult conversations.
Mm-hmm. Well, I like what you're saying there. And again, I'm going to rehash what I said earlier on. The best way to establish that trust, Andrew, is from here on out, because one of the things I'm not really hearing is I'm not hearing people saying, hey, let's slow this thing down, talking about the two bills, the House bill and the Bill 2800. I don't hear enough politicians saying, hey, let's slow this down. Let's get the Mass Chiefs of Police involved. Let's get some trainers. Let's all slow down. Let's bring in some subject matter experts and have them explain some of this stuff to us. Let's get some training. Because again, I know that a lot of this is happening nationally, but it's not necessarily happening here. So why aren't more politicians saying, hey, let's slow this down and bring these people in so we can get this right and build that trust that you spoke about at the beginning, Andrew? Why aren't people doing that?
Because they're used to being told what to do. Too many lawmakers on Beacon Hill, more than 2/3 of House Democrats vote 100% of the time with the leadership of the House. And if you're accustomed to essentially outsourcing your brain and you're just going to follow the leader and be told how to vote, then you don't mind if the process is botched. So that's how I'm different, is that I have a backbone. I'm not going to toe the party line. And yeah, we may disagree on these policies, but in the end, I'm going to engage in respectful research and try to bring all stakeholders to the table And I want to be clear, Dean, while I have some ideas about qualified immunity and limits on force that you don't maybe agree with, I don't like the process of how this bill has gone about. So that's where I hope we agree.
So I can't believe we've almost been at it for an hour here, Andrew. Time is flying by. I don't know if you realize that it's already 5 of. So how about this? Could I ask you, though I don't know if I'm in your voting district or not, but just, since we spent some time together, we've been emailing back and forth over the past couple of weeks. Could I ask you for a favor? Could I ask you, since you said you don't necessarily agree with qualified immunity, would you be willing to kind of pump the brakes on your beliefs to get more trained or to see things live before you say this is how qualified immunity needs to go? Do you think maybe some time on the street or some time with some training might help you make a better informed decision about qualified immunity and some of the other things we've spoken about tonight?
I absolutely, yes, will always say yes to trying to learn and change my mind. I'm a big believer in this. John Maynard Keynes was an economist, and he had this famous quote where he said, someone asked him, "Hey, why'd you change your mind?" And Keynes said, well, the facts change. And when the facts change, I change my mind. What do you do? Well, what do you do? And so I love that mentality of the world is uncertain and imperfect. I am not so arrogant to think that I know everything. Of course, I would love to go on a ride along. Of course, I want to hear from you and your stakeholders. And I wish this process was more deliberative, but I don't want to use the, you're never going to have all the research in the world. And sometimes, let's be honest, sometimes people use the excuse to study things as a way to obstruct progress, right? Some people say, oh, like coal companies.
Sure.
Coal companies will say, we need to study climate change more. It's not quite ready. I don't know if global warming's, really happening because of carbon emissions. And so coal companies will say, we need to pump the brakes. So I'm not making this analogy to say that police just want to obstruct progress, because I actually think the Mass Chiefs of Police does want a deal. They've been pushing for this for over a year for statewide police licensing. So I give them credit. I give you credit for that. But I'll study it and I'll be willing to change my mind. I do think now is the moment, and I do think in the next few weeks to the next month or two, we need police reform in Massachusetts. And yes, there are worse problems elsewhere in the country, but it's not just that one incident in Springfield. And I'll send you that whole Department of Justice report. But it's a big problem in Springfield. But people say, we can do better even elsewhere in Massachusetts. And I think that's the recognition is if we do this, it's going to build more public trust with police officers. It's going to make everyone's lives a lot better.
I hear you. And again, I just want to state, I am by no means saying that we're perfect in Massachusetts, because we most certainly aren't. We're all human beings. We are imperfect in nature. That's part of what makes us, everybody has their own kind of beauty, because our imperfections is what makes us unique. But again, now that we've had this conversations, I hope, and I would even borderline say I expect that you would be telling people, hey, listen, let's get some information before we make these decisions, and let's put ourselves in a situation to understand what's going on, and let's get people that are trained in this stuff at the table with us, so we can work hand in hand and make the most informed decision possible. So I'm hoping you'll do that at the end of this.
Look, my approach is that we need to have a more deliberative, substantive process and have all the stakeholders involved. I know that the Senate bill in particular did not engage chiefs of police, did not engage police unions in a way that they were satisfied with. Does it mean that I would change what happened out of the Senate bill? No. I'm going to be honest with you. Like, my current views are, I like the Senate bill as it's passed, but the process needs to be better. And I'm willing to have my views changed. I'm willing to go along with ride-alongs. I want to hear from all the stakeholders. But in terms of the direction we need to go, I do believe we need police reform, and this is the moment. Just the process was botched. It was botched, and so let's do it in a way that builds trust. And I apologize. I apologize on behalf of the legislature that this was not a way to build trust, because in the end, we may not agree. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to want to limit qualified immunity. I'm going to want to limit police. I want limits on police use of force. I'm a straight shooter, right? I'm a straight shooter. I'm not going to lie to you, but I'll have my mind change, but the process can be much better.
Okay. So here we are. We're at the top of the hour at 9 o'clock. So again, I just want to thank you, Andrew, for taking time out to have this difficult conversation with me. I hope at some point we get to do this again. We get to follow up. What I'm going to ask for, I'm going to close out with this. So I do have some police officers that are on the call, and that they're paying attention to what's going on here. If anybody would like to volunteer to have, State Representative candidate Flowers do a ride along with them, please email me at supplythewhy@gmail.com, and I will reach out and we'll see if we can set something up. I am also putting myself in that part as well. I would love to have you. I'd love you come down and kind of see how we do things in Stoughton. Obviously, I got to run that up the chain, but we entertain people all the time. We have a Citizens Police Academy, and who knows? Maybe, like I said, I'm not looking to change anybody's mind. I'm just looking to open your mind and just maybe get you to see that sometimes things aren't always as simple as they seem when you get out there. So if you're willing to do that, I'm sure we can get somebody that would be willing to, or a couple somebodies that would be willing to bring you out and kind of show you, what's behind the curtain. Would you be willing to do that?
Yes. Yes, I've said it all night. Yes. I'm not opposed to this. I'm not only am I not opposed, I'm honored by it. Yes, I mean, I have a busy schedule the next few weeks because it's what is it? If you can see right here, it's 27 days until my election, and so every day I'm talking to voters and I'm working my butt off just trying to learn and get pushed. And every day is this. Every day is difficult conversations. And so I can absolutely commit to doing a ride along. Absolutely.
Outstanding. All right, everybody, you heard it there from the representative candidate Flowers' mouth. He's willing to do this. I want to thank everybody for taking time away from their families to listen in and kind of see what we're doing here. So if you like these difficult conversations, please check us out on Facebook at Supply the Why. Also, we have a YouTube channel, also Supply the Why. So please share these videos, and let everybody know what we're doing. And again, we're just trying to have these difficult conversations because we got to try to bring people together. We're a little too divided right now, and we got to get people back together. So thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch everybody next time on the next episode of Difficult Conversations. Good night.
Good night.